I'm Mark Greenstein of Ivy Bound, and an astute reader of my recent article replied with a comment that I want to share. Well, my response is here. It's a piece that I wrote about test optional and withholding scores, and I said those non-hooked students who withhold, don't submit SAT or ACT scores have, quote, taken themselves out of the applicant pool for universities that appreciate scores. And the woman who wrote back, and I know her to be very observant and knowledgeable, she writes, it doesn't mean a student won't be considered. And that is true, because that's the direct point of test optional, that colleges do consider you even absent scores. However, they don't consider you as highly if they are a college that is concerned about scores. Now, there are some schools that are totally unconcerned. They're called test blind. Every other school other than test blind has at least some concern about test scores for non-hooked people. It means that withholding a score, maybe not taking the SAT or ACT in the first place, but in most cases it's kids who've had the chance, took the test, didn't score especially well, and don't want to show it. When you withhold, their presumption is your score's not that good. So you have lost a credential. And that was this woman's other comment, that test optional only means one less credential. And that also is true. But it's a big credential. At state universities with thousands of applicants, they are very numbers oriented. And the two big numbers are GPA and SAT or ACT score. If you're withholding that big credential, there's only one number that greatly animates them. So unless it's a 4.0 out of 4.0, you're not giving yourself as much benefit as somebody else with your same credential GPA who does submit scores, who has the above average that the university finds appealing. Even though they're not going to kick out you from consideration, you are far less likely to get the acceptance. And that's why you've been applying in the first place. So unless hooked, the student who withholds her or his SAT score is pretty much taking out the grand possibility of acceptance. It'll get looked at, but almost certainly you get the denial, not the acceptance. What do I mean by hooked? There's a special category that makes for the hooked kids less reliant on test scores and even GPA. They got to be decent. They can't be dopes, but they can be hooked and thus likely admits based on recruitable athlete or underrepresented ethnicity, or extraordinary extracurricular activity, or likely donor. The proposition that I have for somebody who thinks, gee, your mainstream non-hooked candidate can still get into elite schools, let's say top 40 universities, without showing SAT scores, I challenge you. Find me a single non-hooked applicant who was accepted to a top-ranked school in the last 2 years when test optional has come through without submitting SAT or ACT scores. You will be the first. And I do speak with a good number of parents, that's part of my job at Ivy Bound, after their kids have gotten acceptances. So you would be the first, because across the board so far, the only students getting in without submitting scores to top-tier universities have something extraordinary on their background.